Hello, this is Lisa Hazard with We're All Psychic, and guess what? I say that every time, don't I? But guess what? No, really guess. I'm waiting. You guessed right. Ambleton Strange is here, and we are going to interview him. We, all of us. And you guys, I'm picking up your vibes right now. I know what you want to ask him. And Hamilton Strange?
Hey, what's up?
I have a question for you before you start rambling on.
Let's hear it.
Do you think we're all psychic?
Okay. Yes. I've been thinking about this a lot because I knew I was going to be on here. And yeah, I think so, to a degree. I think that it's definitely something you have to work on. I think that some people are naturally psychic, obviously, because there's many examples throughout history of that. But I also think that anybody can be, as long as they are able to get away from themselves and step into more of a mystical mindset. I also think it's kind of a process to be psychic all the time, because I don't think that people are psychic all the time. But only because I think it's sort of like, something that you have to work on a whole lot. And, I think people that really focus their on their craft of being psychic, and I think people that are really submerging themselves in that ideal are probably psychic all the time. But I think that regular people that aren't necessarily aware of being psychic all the time, or that they are psychic, I think that they do end up having almost like an accidental sort of psychic thing. Almost like, I always think about if you're trying to do something, if you're trying to hit the garbage can with a wad of tissues or something.
You always
right.
think about
It's and you're so focused on being psychic, and then when you try to throw it, you miss it. But then sometimes you'll be in the kitchen and you'll be doing something and you'll be sort of in a rhythm, and then you'll just hit and it'll boom right in. And so I think being psychic is sort of like that for people who aren't practiced. I think there's definitely an NBA version of psychic, but then I think there's sort of minor leagues, and then I think it kind of goes from
I
there.
think that's one of my favorite examples, because I do that all the damn time. Especially I'm sitting on the toilet and I'm throwing the empty roll. Every time I'm I'm not going to make it, but let me ask you this. Don't you have that moment right when you let go that you know what it's going to do? And then you forget it or doubt it or whatever. All that happens really fast. Every time I chunk it, I know exactly what I did wrong if it's not going to hit, and exactly what I did right if it's going to. But I can't retain that information or put it into words.
Right.
It's just really fast, all this stuff happens. But that's a great example.
Thank you.
I do that all the time, always trying to. And I'm not mad if I used to get really mad if I had to go pick the trash out. But now I'm no, touche.
Right.
This will help you learn. Go pick up that Coke can. Oh, it was empty.
Yeah, and that's just part of it. That's
I
the
love
struggle.
that. So, Hamilton Strange, I've known you for a long time, and I think I've watched you just be one of the most open-minded people I've ever met. You can take on a lot of information from different, I guess you could say, subcultures and cultures, more like the way people are, what they think about and what they care about, and you can understand it. You spend a lot of time immersing yourself in different types of social groups and different kinds of people. And I've always thought that was really interesting, how you just can fit, but you're always kind of apart too. And I always totally thought you were psychic, because I think we all are, but that was kind of a later on thing. You know what? I think everybody's psychic. It wasn't that. I really think they are. It's not just me always saying that about somebody. And you are definitely somebody I thought is very intuitive. And I've watched you over the years work with it all the time, but maybe not consciously. And over the last year, you started talking more about being interested in, you were interested in ghost hunting and stuff like that. And now you've been listening to, you said, he says he's been listening to a lot of podcasts and watching stuff and learning a lot about metaphysical topics and energy work. And like you said, what you said was great. The craft. I want to talk about witchcraft eventually, because it's a craft. Akasha, who will be on the show soon. Hopefully, haven't introduced you yet, but she will explain that to you. But Aaron, what do you think about where you're at right now compared to where you were when you met me, with your whole mindset about how psychic works, how energy works? Is it part of that? I mean, you've thought about this stuff, maybe not in those terms, maybe in terms of whatever religion you were studying at the time. Because to me, you study.
Yeah.
You don't seem to own something.
I think I'm always sort of on a path, and I think that that's the main thing. I think, especially being an artist, I think it's more about a lot of times we're natural observers, and I think that like that's one of the reasons why we are able to do some of the things we do. I feel like a lot of times, even though if people aren't familiar with my work, I do a lot of like illustration stuff, and it's mostly more horror or Halloween influenced or whatever. But I always feel like a lot of the characters that I sort of come up with are representations of people that I know, or maybe like somebody I've like talked to or something. Because I think that that's the thing. I think that we all sort of get each other pretty instantaneously. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think they say that the first you can know somebody in the first 20 seconds. That's like. And I think that that's true because I think that, in a sense, unless they're just being totally deceptive, you can sort of get a sense of a person if you pay attention. And that might be psychic, And I think that there's different levels of psychic, too. I think there are different types because I was thinking about that the other day, too. It's like you have some people that sort of see it in their mind, and I think that you have other people that sort of feel it in their heart. And I think empaths are more about feeling it in their heart. I think empaths are a lot better about picking up energy in a room. And people that I guess that would be technically psychic, I think that they would be able to kind of more or less visualize in their mind, something or something about somebody.
Okay, for me, I kind of have a distinction between psychic. I think empath fits under everything.
Sure, yeah.
Because I think everybody's very empathic, and there's a lot of subtleties that we don't have words for. What you were just saying, levels of psychic. We need words, right? You've heard the podcast, so I've mentioned this a few times in my podcast repetitively. We need to make a dictionary for these things.
Right.
You don't know how to explain what you're trying to say. I get it. They get it.
Yeah.
But we need more words, right?
Well, and I think, because, a lot of this, and that's the thing, too, you have to remember with anything that has to do with any kind of, like, mysticism or occult stuff, outside of, certain Eastern traditions, because they weren't so plagued by, suppression of information the way that the Western world has been. We've lost so much stuff about, the history of magic, the history of witchcraft. And so a lot of this stuff hasn't really been brought up again, prior to the 60s, when Wicca started happening and people started, working more in that sort of realm, and even like traditional witchcraft.
That's always everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah,
everywhere I've lived, there's always witchcraft somewhere. Somebody's doing it.
Yeah, exactly right. But even with like traditional witchcraft, it's not saying that it's original witchcraft, but it's just doing witchcraft in more of a traditional style. So even then, it's like we're sort of always looking for clues, picking up pieces, things like that. In those sort of kind of concepts. That doesn't necessarily make them right or wrong because I'm also somebody I think that sort of believes in the idea of like chaos magic and the idea that you can kind of create your own gods. And, if you wanted to use, your favorite comic book character, somebody off a TV show, it's not necessarily the deity itself. I think it's the energy in which you're putting towards that. You're sort of like calling that into existence.
Yes, that's a great example.
So I think that, in a way, I think there is more freedom than people, sort of allow themselves to have a lot of times. And I think that like, magic is, and, magic work and things like that, I think it's so much different than I think people really, think about it being. I think, we all want to have telekinesis. We all want to, get the coffee from across the room, with a thought or whatever. And maybe, at some point, if you start now and work on it, you might get there. But I think that it's mostly like, like you say about moving energy around the room. And I think it's about also, expanding, expanding your aura, and creating a, Damien Eccles talks about this a lot, about expanding your aura, creating a solar body, getting into a place where, you can kind of feel other people's energy, with your aura. I mean, he says that your aura is supposed to be like, 12 feet across,
It goes
8
out
feet
there.
across.
It's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Right.
it's
And
like
that
it's
you're
like your personal space.
right. And that
Is
like
it
you're
not? It's like your personal space.
right.
It's kind of your aura, so you can feel it, can't you?
Yeah.
Can't you feel it out there?
And I
Come
think
on,
that
can you? And
I'm working on
can
it.
you feel it? No,
Not
really.
yet,
You
but
know
I'm
you
getting
can
there.
feel it. You know you can. You can feel it.
Sometimes I can, and I think that that's true.
You're not a
Yeah.
close talker.
No.
You always have. Just look at how you notice how other people are standing to each other too.
Sure.
And you're probably in your head going, that bubble, someone's in that person's bubble, or there's a reason that person's keeping that person out of that bubble. That's like their auras. What do you think happens? Like, okay, you're getting there, you're seeing, all this stuff already. So now you're just trying to experience it fully.
Well, and I think it's about being more, allowing myself to be more open about it, because I think for a long time, for a really long time, I think, I think as society, we get so hung up on the concept of the intellectual, and what that is, and being embarrassed about, which I know some people aren't.
About feelings.
Right, but no,
beliefs.
but about love, about
and
saying,
love,
like, I love people, I love, people in the world, and to walk around and do that and to say that all the time, I think it kind of comes, for a lot of people, it feels like, oh man, I don't want to be that guy that's, walking around being like, oh, I love you, or I love it, And I mean, I don't think you have to necessarily be like gushy about it, but I think it's also about learning how to feel that, and learning how to allow yourself to take that in and realize that, sometimes, when you're in a place that seems, scary and things like that, it's like, just try to change your energy, as much as you can, or your mindset.
You can always change something. There's something you always have all power to change. You can change the way you're looking at it every time. It's hard. It's harder than changing, like, getting out of the box is a lot easier. To punch your way out, like, Uma Thurman in Kill Bill.
Yes,
Punch your way out of that grave.
Right.
But, maybe, And yes, we had an interruption, like we do. So, Hamilton Strange, as I was saying, I think it would help a lot of people to think of things not so much as a spiritual sense or a physical sense, but both. So when, you stick your feelers out for your bubble, or you stick out whatever it is in your mind that you imagine it being, you will fully experience it the way you expect to. Whatever that feels like. It's like, I think I've talked about this before too. So, like, cats and dogs. You've seen Atticus. We've talked about this. Atticus and the dogs and cats have the little white whiskers on them all over their bodies.
Right.
Just, how they move when you touch them a certain way over those. What does that feel like? Is it a feel? Do they see?
Let me clear this. Atticus. Atticus is my dog, by the way. It's like we weren't talking about like Atticus Finch.
It's just some dude, Atticus. He has these white hairs all over, man.
If you've ever read the alternate ending to Kill a Mockingbird, it discloses that Atticus Finch was covered in whiskers.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of hard to get your hands on a copy of it. But if you send me $50 through PayPal, I'm just kidding. So getting back to what we were talking about, is it to you, I asked my husband Mikey this, and you and Mikey probably best friends from what I can tell.
Oh, yeah.
And Mikey's like, I asked him, do you think of it as spiritual? And he said yes. He does think of the energy work or psychic stuff as a spiritual experience.
Right.
Do you consider it spiritual? Or you consider it just a part of life?
I'm kind of coming to a place now where I sort of feel like the idea of the self, the ego, as I like to call, they say in different spiritual practices, the idea of that is, that kind of goes into the feeling of is the ego, do you believe that you really are the persona that you are, or do you believe that this is mostly just like some kind of a a machine that like something that, for lack of a better word, a soul would be inside of. And if you do believe that there is a sort of a soul in there, then that would sort of mean that we're already spiritual beings, sort of like encased in this meat packaging with with our auras. And I mean, some people I've even heard say that, the physical body is just a harder manifestation of the aura, that, because of the way that, we have to have sort of a physical body in this physical realm in order to be here. We have to have, that. So, I mean, I don't know, but I mean, what do you think about that? What do you think about all that?
I think that's really fabulous because, everything you're saying they're all things I've thought about too. Like, well, what do other people believe? And then, like, for me, I had to say, like, what do I believe? So for me, it changes. It doesn't ever stay the same so far.
Right.
I haven't been somewhere and just been like, I wholeheartedly believe, amen, this is the answer that I've been asking and for the question and all that stuff.
Right.
So the big question being, well, what am I? Who are we? What's up? What's going on? What's the real big picture? What is it? Who is it? What's going on? Is that, to me, kind of like a big spiritual question, like for you? Because I don't have an answer for that.
But I mean, and that kind of gets into, that kind of gets into some things.
So like for me, the psychic stuff is more part of the living experience.
Right.
But I'm asking you, is it more of a spiritual living experience, do you think, for you yet? Or do you have an answer for yourself right at this moment? I mean,
as far as like psychic ability.
Yeah, psychic ability or
spiritual. I don't think it is necessarily spiritual, because I think it's something that we are, I think it's something that we're actually, able to do. I think it's part of a sense that we have. I think
I do too. I think it's a lot of senses.
But I don't. So I think for it to be part of one of our senses, I don't know that it's actually would be spiritual. I think that see, that's the thing. It's like right now I'm really sort of at a weird place with the concept of a spiritual world, and in a way, like as far as like ghosts and things like that, because I haven't really figured out how all that fits in to some of the things that I've been kind of looking into and learning about. And I haven't really figured out, I mean, it's like, I know that there are spirits, and I know that there are, ghosts, and I know that, there are things that we can't explain. And I'm not thinking about it like, there's some, absolute truth, because I think that's the other thing really when it comes down to it. And one of the things I think is so amazing about the idea of the self, about the idea of mysticism and any kind of like occult practice, and Wiccans, you guys are in there. Don't think you're not a part of the occult, because you are.
And we had another interruption.
Good Lord, this is crazy.
It's like a weird thing. It must be ghosts. I don't know.
But anyway, so what I was saying before about the idea of ghosts and spirits and things like that, it's like I think that I think that they're real, and I think that but I don't know why that they would be real, and I don't know with like Buddhism, for instance. I mean, if you die, you go into sort of 49 days of, or 43, please Buddhists don't get mad at me, 43 days of walking the earth before you end up going to the bardo, before then you go into being reborn. That's a summation. That would kind of like, why would there be ghosts? Because if you die and then you go into that, then there would be no reason for them to necessarily be around, right? But I mean, but I think that is why nobody really knows, and you always have to take things with a sort of a grain of salt. You always have to kind of take things and like look at like, okay, well, this makes sense, and maybe this makes sense, and just try to kind of figure it out yourself, because that's one of the great things about it. Nobody has a real plan, and all of this is just trying to figure out what the truth is, and that truth can be different for everybody. I do kind of have this feeling that like if you totally believe that when you die you go into some crazy Miyazaki universe, where you become Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, I think maybe that's happens. Maybe your brain is just like, boom, let's go there. Let's do that. So maybe some people when they die they want to be ghosts. Maybe there's a even a different level of human being type creatures that are on the planet that are way more powerful than we are, and that can sort of appear and reappear, and they think it's hilarious to like scare people in their house at night. I have no idea, but it's like, so that is something. But I do.
So you have you love to think about this stuff. You
No,
love
that's
to research it. This is how I've known you. Like you always like approach things from all angles and different pursuits and different interests that catch your attention and things. All through you're exploring new metaphysical stuff that you haven't looked at before, and looking into like spiritualists and spiritualism. I remember like Mikey talking about at work. You have been talking about spiritualism a lot and had an interest in that. And that was probably that was back before we got quarantined in April. So so that was a long time ago. And you approach things from all these angles, and you love to discuss the possibilities, but you just haven't figured out ones that are just right for you yet. Is kind of what I'm feeling here.
I think that's true, and I think that's like I said earlier when we started talking about being on a journey. And I think that there's so many things that are there's so many things to learn about human beings and human existence, human experience, and I think that to sort of just settle on one thing, I think for me is really tough, because I think you can sort of learn from a little bit of everything. I've been noticing a lot more that when I, hear somebody on a podcast or something like that, talking about what they believe, there's a lot more blending of concepts. There's a lot more people who are like, oh, I am a witch, but I, do like guided meditation stuff, and maybe I'm a little bit into Taoist stuff, and and I really like Hare Krishna stuff, so it's like you sort of have this idea, and I think that is amazing, and I think that's really important.
The diversity and the open-mindedness, that kind of thing,
right? Because I think that really, I think to label one thing, to say that like I'm this, sort of eliminates you from every other possibility of any other influence. We're all human beings on this planet. I'm about to get really dramatic. And, and we all are trying to figure out what's right, what's true, like you say. And I think you can always learn from that. I think you can always learn from, different experiences. That's one of the sad things about, a lot of Christian groups and a lot of their beliefs is that, they're so closed off to things. I think it would be amazing if you had some, hardcore fire and brimstone preacher, coming up to the pulpit and being like, all right, let's center our, consciousness on our chest and breathe in deeply 3 times before, that would be before we pray. Be. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be amazing.
I bet someone's doing it somewhere.
I hope so.
Out west, probably. Not here.
So,
I hope so too. That'd be awesome. I'd go to that practice, or I think you have to call it. You couldn't call it. I guess you could call it whatever.
That's church.
We should call it something totally new, though.
Right.
It won't be church, but it'll be church.
It's a gathering.
As a gathering. Some people are calling them in the witchcraft community around here. They call them circles a lot. Have you heard that term?
I've heard
around
that
here lately. Yeah. I've never heard that, but I haven't really been exposed to much of this stuff socially, until the last few years, because I didn't know all this stuff was out there,
right?
Because I worked from home and I knew it was on other places in the world from being on the internet. But locally, it was just over the last 10 years or so that I've met people who have pursued this as well, and I'm meeting more people who are starting to say, like, this happened to me. I'm going to look at that. Like, Aaron, what's happened to you? Like, weird stuff has happened to you. Can you think of anything, like, offhand that would say to you, like, maybe you had a moment where you saw the future or you had a dream that came true? What was the one thing that really, like, makes you go,
Oh, man, I don't know. I mean, there's not necessarily, like, one particular thing that would, like, say, like, oh,
any of them in particular coming to mind that was, like, a moment you had where you were like, well, nothing explains that except that maybe that was a psychic experience. Maybe that was a blah 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 experience.
As far as like
Spiritual experience.
as far as any kind of like psychic or spiritual experience, things like that, it's like, I guess sort of, but I think the thing is that for me, it's more about just a feeling that I have about the world. I think that was like the original thing. I think I was always, when I started, first getting into like folklore stuff and, trying to find out about that. I think it honestly is nerdy enough. It started out because I think I just really liked horror movies. And then just kind of thinking as a child about, how real that is. Oh my God, that's so real. Like we watched a movie and now the ghost from that movie is going to come in my room and get me, like that kind of thing. And, but then, kind of getting to where like, what is the truth about this stuff? What is this about?
Right.
And I think that like that is kind of, sort of my entrance into, paranormal stuff, horror stuff. But I also, once you start looking for stuff, a lot of times you find things.
Oh, yes.
And
yes. Very good point.
So I think, with that, just going out to like creepy places, being in houses and knowing that you're not the only person in there, even though you are the only living person in there.
But how do you know? You feel it.
You feel it. Exactly right.
Know.
Exactly. Which is like what I'm saying before about the empath stuff. Right. Yeah. And so, but it's like, as far as like seeing anything, like seeing an old lady or seeing some kind of crazy thing.
Anywhere you lived, or have a ghost experience, or?
Honestly, not really. Yeah. I mean, that's real boring. I'm sorry.
No, it's not. Most people haven't. I don't know. I think it's like goes back to what you just said a minute ago. I like to be dramatic myself. Everything goes back to something you said. That's right. The answer. He found it. No, it's like it's what you expect. Like if you go out and pursue these houses, that are haunted, and you expect to see a ghost, it will happen. But there is like a lot of people who believe in, like you were talking about mindfulness earlier before we started the show, I think.
Right, yeah.
And I love mindfulness as a practice. And I still do it. And I was taught how to do this at like 24, and I still do it, but it took a good 10, 15 years for me to quit being so stubborn. So I think having the attitude of what can I learn from this is like mindfulness, but it's also, if you practice it as an energy worker, or when you work with energy, or do something psychic, or do a spell, or do any, whatever your choice, pray,
Right.
Yeah, there's, I think you've talked about it before, studies where these, like massive prayer has like helped other people get better. So have you ever read about that stuff before? I thought we talked about it one night when y'all were burning some fire.
We probably did.
Burning some fire.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. No, and I think a lot of that stuff also, goes into like, incantation, I think, in a way. I think that is sort of bringing things into being. I think being able to use your energy from from a large group of people. I think that does. I think that has some sort of healing power. I think that there's something to that.
I do too. I think it's, I don't know. You're such a great artist. So this is something I wanted to bring up earlier. And I think it was one of the times we got interrupted. But something you were talking about earlier was like how, loving the world, loving the people, loving what they're about. And something about your art, a lot of the times you're drawing faces in a lot of your art.
Yeah, yeah.
And those faces always like have, there's like they say so much about like a weird, complicated emotion that a person has. It could be on a bird or a person or something you made up, or it could be on anybody. But the faces you draw, they have those individual, complex kind of like undefined emotional, physical, spiritual experience that person or that character you made up and drew is having right now. And it's like, I know how that feels. There's no word for that. That's not, I'm tired. It's not, I'm confused. It's not, I'm this. It's nothing simple.
Right.
It's like, it's a really deep, it's not yours either necessarily. I say, it's like you've seen everybody have this particular complex experience of reaction or something, and you can put it on like a face. What is that? How do you do that? What do you call that?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's about being observant. and I think that that's something that like, all artists have. It's really cool. I heard this quote the other day. It was all artists are magicians and all magicians are artists.
I like that.
And I love that, because I think that, there is a sort of magic. You think about like music. I think music has so much energy,
Yeah.
and it just transforms everything in a room. Or in a car. I mean, you could be driving around at night by yourself and a song come on and it just like takes you somewhere.
It fills you. It just like,
right.
Nothing like it. Yeah, there's nothing like it.
And that to me, I think that's sort of, that is magic, and I think that
it's like empathy too. That's an empath putting all their stuff on a tape,
yes,
or a record, or through a machine, and look what they can do. This imprint coming through to you. They're putting it out there. It's like there,
right?
But you're doing that with art. I don't know if you realize you're doing it, and but Mikey does it. A lot, like artists that I know. I only know a few, but they're all really good, and they put something in those pictures that it's like there's a feeling when I look at the art, a feeling about what's going on. I'm not as visual like you guys are.
Right.
So I get more of a feeling when I look at something right away.
But you're musical. I mean, you're more of an audio kind of person.
Ears, I'm more ears,
So I think that's really cool. And I think I think that right there kind of goes into what I meant by, empaths versus psychics, versus, some people just sort of like have different senses.
Like a natural innate.
It's all the same. I think it's all sort of the same as art. I think some people just sort of sense the world in different ways, and I think that, obviously there are people who are psychic who aren't empathic, and I think that, you have to be a little bit, but I think, I always think about like, there's probably some lady out there who's like actually the most psychic person in the world and she hates everybody because she just can't get away from it.
She's mad. She's mad.
It's like, just shut up.
I bet she has a lot of cats.
Probably. But I mean, it's like, so I think that, with psychic ability, some psychics are artists, some psychics are, singers, musicians, writers, different things like that. And I think that, it sort of kind of falls in the same way. I think that, we all sort of have our own sort of categories. I hate saying that, but like of, sort of like where we start from and our perception of the world and how we perceive things and the people around us. And I think for artists, a lot of times, it's more about studying faces for me. Because I just think the expression and the way that like, you can sort of see what somebody's thinking and you can sort of like visually like see like the thoughts running through their head a lot of times. Like to me, I find that so fascinating and I don't know, I just really love it.
It is like that. And that's like your art does that a lot where you just get this like, what's that guy is feeling this or I can feel it myself. So I think there's some magic there and in that particular way. Like I think you're somehow like you saw that face or you felt that way probably somewhere else. Like when I think about a lot of faces you draw.
Yeah.
And it's like I think you felt it from them and then you put it on paper and make another view. I just think that's the psychic, that's the transfer of energy. You're putting your energy in there.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's a print or if it's on a screen, I mean you can get it,
Right.
So I mean that's my opinion.
Right.
So, like, what you just described sounds like you do the same thing when you look at other people's art, and you can get that whole experience. So,
well, and then I think that also kind of boils down to, man, I have this other thing that I really believe, hardcore, and I was actually talking to your husband about it, and I've talked to quite a few people about it in the past, and I think story time. No, but we went to, I went and saw this guy play a long time ago at the Brick. His name is Microwave Dave, and he's an old blues guy, and he's great. But he was talking about his songs, and every time he would play a song, he would say, I learned this song, in Memphis, I was here and here, and then, but it was like, it wasn't like he was saying, I wrote this song, and I started thinking about that, and this is a long time ago. And so, I've thought about it for a really long time, and I've really kind of felt that, none of us are really like, I think none of us are really like creating things on our own. I don't think anybody's really writing a song on their own. I don't think anybody's really doing any art on their own. I think when you get into like a zone of it, I think that you're really getting like feedback from somewhere else.
What is it? Did you listen to our spirit guides conversations? Have you ever read about spirit guides, or do you know what they are?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's possible. I don't say that anything's impossible, but
that's not what you mean.
But that's not really what I'm saying as much. I mean, and maybe it is. I mean, maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe it's like if you're artistic, your spirit guides are artistic, or maybe it's some sort of like guardian angel type situation. Maybe certain people give off different energies that spirits are more attracted to, and if you give like an artistic energy off, then people are sort of, spirits are more attracted to that. I have no idea, but I know sometimes when I'm drawing and I'm working on something and I'm really deep into it, and I start like kind of doing things differently than I normally would. And it's not like I'm doing it like the exact same way every time I'm in that sort of like mindset. But sometimes it's just like I'll stop and I'll think, man, I've always wanted to learn how to shade like that. And how am I doing that? Or like, why is that coming out like that? Like, this isn't even in my style.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something really interesting about
you're being
that.
Guided, you think?
You're sort of being guided, or you're sort of being like, the ideas are sort of like, coming to you, because a lot of times it'll remind me of other artists,
you
more
feel
than
you're tapping into something psychic.
Yeah, I think we are
energetically when you're doing that.
I think so. I think so. I
felt that way with music, especially when I was writing a song and it was just coming out.
Right. Right.
Is that what you were talking about? Like when drawing, like
right.
For me, like writing a song, just okay, it's just
right. Like sometimes it's just flowing.
Yeah,
like,
is that the art does that? Yeah, that does feel right. And I've had people that I've played with be like, hey, did you feel the blah, blah, blah? Like
right.
the bandmates or
that
something?
energy
and
in the room.
Like some bands will have their own name for that feeling.
Right.
And like of just everybody's in sync, Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really great because you can ride that energy.
Yes,
and then there's so many like insane things that sort of come out of that. And I think that that's another thing. I think, learning about growing up as a human being, I think that, we sort of have this idea that we stop at a certain age, but I don't think we do. And I think that the problem is that we get kind of bogged down by, all of these like necessities, unfortunately, but like these like things of like, oh, I got to get a job, and like, it's not going to be, it's probably not going to be a job I like, and I'm not going to be making enough money to really make it the way I want to, and I can pay the rent, I can do all this stuff, and like I can really get into like, I guess I can, I get enough money, I can get that new TV, and all this stuff, and and I think that like, the more that you get kind of sucked into that concept of like, man, I'm really upset, and this material thing is going to make me feel better, and really there's nothing material that can save you.
This is, this is what I was thinking of when I was talking about mindfulness, manifestation.
Manifestation.
That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
So, like, if you expect your next job to be a piece of crap, and you expect to just be getting by, and you expect you're not gonna like it, you're not gonna. Well, it is gonna suck.
I guess
you won't get paid enough if you think of it that way.
I guess that. Yeah. No.
You know what I'm saying? It's
I think
how you think of it too, for like kind of what that feels like what you're getting at.
Well,
it's like
sort of.
Yeah.
I think manifestation, is also, I really, manifestation is very interesting.
It is very. Some people are really good at it.
Some people are really good at it. And I think that's something that everybody can do. I think everybody can manifest things. And I think that that's something that kind of comes from sort of being able to figure out your spirit self, like you would say, or like your soul, getting in touch with that, being able to sort of like figure out a way to clear your mind and be able to focus on the things that you want and the things that you, desire. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's another thing that like a lot of people get into with magic, and, these hang-ups of, things. And then, like I said earlier, things are not going to save you, but you have to sort of like come to a place in it where you realize like, I do like things. There is a thing that I like, and if you like a thing and you want to have that thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But as far as manifestation goes, I love the concept of that. That's something that, me and my friend Heather have been talking a lot about lately. And I think it's real. We've been talking a lot about how I think it's easier to manifest things for other people than it is yourself. And I think that, there's so many examples of that in my life where things have been, I think, manifested for me, or, I've actually, maybe done it for other people unaware of it. I think that that's another thing. People are doing magic all the time and they're not aware of it. Yeah. And I think that's an example of manifestation.
See, to me, magic and psychic is the same thing to me.
Yeah.
So, like, if I were to say, I'm going to psychically make you feel no pain, it's the same thing as casting a spell. To me, how I do it is a different way than that person might do it. We're doing the same thing.
Right.
So, like...
But I think it's awareness, like you say.
It is awareness, Yeah. It's just... And a lot of people say intention. And that's how you make things happen. You have to really focus on it.
Right.
I think that book, The Secret, was the big book that came out about manifestation.
Right, yeah. And I never read that.
I never read it.
Yeah. I don't know anybody that has.
Got mad about that book.
Yeah, there was
but
some
that's
stuff.
what it was about. It was about manifesting, but it never got into, like, I didn't read it, so I can't say this.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I thought it never got into, like, the spiritual aspects of it as much, but more so the actions and how to do it.
But I think that also goes into something, like you say, about the spiritual aspects of things. I think, one of the amazing things about right now that I'm seeing in 2020, and with a lot of my customers that come in, I'm a tattoo artist by trade. A lot of my customers that come in, the other day I was talking to this guy and we got into, like awareness and,
wow, that's cool.
all this kind of stuff, breathing stuff, and it was like, I kind of just like, I'm always one of those people, like, I'll say like, oh, it's weird, how the energy is around. So I'll just like throw some little thing out there just to see if, where it goes. And this guy was like just on it. Like he was like into it. We were in sync. We talked the whole time. I know it annoyed everybody else in the shop. It's fine. But, I think that there's a changing mentality out there. I think people are starting to wake up to the idea that, there is something to psychic stuff. There is something to, crystal work. There is something to, things that aren't necessarily normal mainstream ideas. And I think 2020 has like opened up so many different channels in people's minds. And it could be because people are trapped at home with the coronavirus. It could be that, maybe, we're a lot closer. We felt a lot closer to death for a while. And, people are sort of like reevaluating like their, the things that are important to them, and realizing that we need to get back to more of an easier thing, like, more, a natural feeling of things. And that, maybe this material stuff isn't really important. Maybe my health or, my mental well-being is more important. And I think that's amazing. And I cannot wait. I mean, if there's any silver lining in all the stuff that's going on right now, I can't wait to see what comes out of this, because I think, in the, near future, as far as like the magicians are concerned, as far as the scientists are concerned, I think a lot of that stuff is going to start coming together. I think people are going to start really thinking about, how science and magic and, mysticism and things like that can kind of flow in the same way. And this is not new stuff, and I think that's what's so interesting. We've come to a place where science is sort of taken over, which is fine, because I do believe in science. I think it's fantastic. But we're coming to a place where we've kind of stepped away from the mystic scientists, and, Isaac Newton, perfect example of somebody who was they call him like the last magician, because he was somebody that believed in science. And he also, was an alchemist. He also studied magic. He studied everything, and he was fascinated by the world. And I think that people need to become more fascinated with the world again.
Instead of focusing on what they lack or what someone else is doing.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because it's all a mindset. This is a.
I love hearing this from you, man. This is really good to hear from you.
Well, but it's true. Everything is an illusion. In your mind, it's all a projection. And I think, it's like you can't let, these things get you. I mean, honestly, people are living in terrible, terrible situations. People wake up every day, in horrible places and things. And I think that, if you have the ability to do anything to help those people with, whatever way, I mean, that's also a part of it. I think being aware of your surroundings and being a part of, building a community, having a place for people to go. I mean, if you have the ability to do that stuff, I think that's important. And I see that a lot. People are getting a lot more open to the fact that we're all souls. Everybody out there is just a soul with a body, and you can't judge a book by its cover, like they say. I'm saying a bunch of stuff that's just like would be on the back of a card, but that's okay. But I think it's like, as you walk through the world, I think it's important to keep that stuff in mind. And I think that's another part of mindfulness, is realizing that, if you live in a place where, you have a sort of, privilege, you live a sort of privileged life because you're not being, treated like, shit all the time. You're not, living in squander. I think recognizing, the things that you have and not letting, like, something stupid and small, like, change your energy, because, you know, everything is moment to moment. And if you can learn to live moment to moment without focusing on the past, without worrying about the future, then you can find yourself in a clear mind. You can find yourself in an enlightened state. And then at that point, they say you'll be able to do more magic stuff. You'll be able to work on your aura more. You'll be able to figure out, what it is that you are inside. I think those are things that people really need to focus on, and I think that they are in 2020, and I find that really fascinating.
Me too. It's a wonderful thing. I think it's wonderful. On that note, man, on that positive from Hamilton Strange, which shocks me, but not really, because, man, he always shocks me. That's what's not really about it. It just happens so often. So thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great.
Do you have any last words for anybody who's listening?
Oh, man. I would say just keep your chin up and, stay positive and get out there and, save the day. Save the day for yourself.
Save the day for yourself.
And, Black Lives Matter. And,
and
good night.
Good night. And good evening. Thank you for listening. I will be back with you in a couple days with Misty. Out.